Good afternoon, friends. Stephen Benoon with Israeli News Live. And guess who we have back tonight after a long, long time? And I'm so glad to have Deborah Tavares joining me tonight. She is live in Northern California, which we're not live per se, but I mean, me and her are live with each other, but you guys will get to hear the recording of this. But Deborah, it is nice to have you back. And look, I'm looking at your picture. You look younger than ever.
Well, it may be a picture when I was younger, but I want to say hi and hello to everybody. And I do run 3 websites. I run stopthecrime.net, primarywater.org, and toxicsky.org. Now, it's important to understand we're going to be talking about water and what happened with the inability to have water in the hydrants in the Palisades. And we'll get into that in more detail because this is a crucial topic. Also, on toxicsky.org, I would urge all of you to listen to the movie that I posted at the top of the website. It's called Unconventional Gray.
Got it up there
Grey.
for them, Deborah, so they can see it. Yes. And we'll
Excellent.
have to later go into that a little bit too. If we don't do it this week, we'll do it next week because a good friend of mine, airline pilot, he told me a lot about the chemtrails that I didn't know about.
Well, they murdered Michael Murphy. This film was to have never been released. And a team of people that I am with found the movie that was being held back. So all of you listening, you get to hear Michael's final movie, again, Unconventional Gray. He did 2 prior movies. One was called What in the World Are They Spraying? And the second movie was Why in the World Are They Spraying? So now let's move into my story about the fires that are happening in Southern California. For all of you, I live in Northern California now, but I was born in Santa Monica in Southern California. I grew up in the area of the Palisades. I had dear friends that lived in the Pacific Palisades. I also lived in Malibu. And when I was only 11 years old, I actually lived just beyond Topanga Canyon. You might have heard Topanga Canyon being mentioned a lot during these fires. I lived on Big Rock, on the top of the mountain. And I was coming home, and it had been very heavy Santa Ana winds that day. We were experiencing a lot of ash because there was a fire. And I saw the flames lapping over and cresting the hilltop, and I ran home and told my parents. My parents told me, oh, don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt us or be a problem. And I saw that it was because the flames were heading right towards us. And I told them, please go outside and look. And they wouldn't. They wouldn't look. Now, I'm 11 years old, and I can see the flames are on their way. So fortunately, the fire department had a truck at the top of our driveway with a bullhorn, and they told us to evacuate immediately. Here's my experience. My mother ran out to the car. I was following my mother with my brother behind me. And Steve, my mother was jumping high up in the air and screaming because there were all of these rodents that had come up from underground, and they were running all over, and they were running into her ankles.
Wow.
Now, I know they had to have been running into my ankles too, but I already knew that we needed to get out and that we needed to get off that mountain immediately. And there were a lot of switchbacks to get down to the Pacific Coast Highway. We stayed with my grandparents. My father stayed at our house, and he fought the fire. He used sprinklers and hoses to wet around the house. We had a rock roof. Our house at the top of the hill, there were 5 houses at the top at the time. Our house was the only one that survived. Now, I'm going to talk to you more about an aspect of all of this that is absolutely jaw-dropping, but I'm going to continue. So right now, we are witnessing a war on us. It's a 5th-generation warfare. In other words, It's not guns and soldiers and tanks. It is frequencies. Now let's go into how they create the winds. This is a patent, and you need to understand this is warfare, and we are the enemy. All of us, all of you listening, we're the enemy. Make no mistake. So let's talk about wind microburst. Microburst winds, okay? So it's an electromagnetic radio wave crimes. And what they're doing, it's tornado-like high wind gusts, a microburst vortex that whips trees outside of houses, and it's artificially spawned, precision-targeted microburst vortex created by a scalar electromagnetic weapon system mounted on cell towers everywhere. Steve, cell towers. This is the U.S. patent number. U.S. patent number 7629918. Raytheon, under the operational command and control of Lockheed Martin, is the world's largest defense contractor at the time that I'm looking at this patent. And it is high winds, which literally can shake the walls, and just as what we're hearing them called devil winds. We're hearing them called all kinds of names, but these are microburst winds using the cell phone towers and artificially spawning precision-targeted microburst. So the Santa Ana winds that you're hearing about and the winds that I experienced growing up in Malibu that were also known to me then as Santa Ana winds are created. The weather has been created for many, 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 many years. And I also want to talk about the weapons used for the targeting of the microwaves. And I've posted these on my website under source docs. So you'll see the patent number for how they create the microwaves. And they're using, this is microwave warfare. Absolutely microwave warfare. And so we're looking and we're watching streaming live in prime time, intentional destruction of the United States. And this is going to hit you too. If it's not fires, it's going to be floods. It will be hurricanes. It will be tornadoes. Look what they've done to the people because of Hurricane Helene. That was a microwaved warfare attack. Make no mistake. So here's what they told us a long time ago in the NASA war document, and that is on stopthecrime.net. For years, I have been going over this document. I'm going to read you a couple of things right now. On page 93, it's a PowerPoint, but they say that they would exploit the CNN syndrome. In other words, our media would be exploited. It is. They would also, they say this, that they would sink carriers via swarm attacks, capture, torture Americans in living color on prime time, terror attacks within the continental United States and worldwide, using binary biocritical infrastructure, takedown with the internet and the energy waves. They would create an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse. They would use RF frequencies against our brains. They would create serious psy-war and collateral damage and exploitation. On page 45, beam weapons increasingly prevalent. We are all being hit, all of us, with beam weapons. For those of you that are experiencing your eyesight dimming or different kinds of damage with your eyesight, that is largely due to the microwave weapons being used. Your cell phone is a weapon, and everyone has become accustomed to utilizing weapons to communicate with. We've talked about that over the years. On page 50, effects of low-power microwaves. Now, I have this document loaded on my website. I've talked about it in many, many conferences that I've gone to. It's the U.S. Army Walter Reed document. You can read this in its entirety. They talk about everything that you're hearing now with changing our physiology, all of the horrific mRNA interior redesigning of us as humans. But they tell us that these low frequencies affect our behavioral performance. It'll cause seizures and gross alterations in brain function, and it'll kill us. Now look around. Look at how many people have already been injured. Let's take a look at page 55. This is legal. They tell us on page 55, these are the weapons that are legal. And it has to be legal, or our corporate government, USA Inc., would not be doing this to us. They say microwave RF anti-functional and anti-personnel weapons are legal. Chemical weaponry is legal. Psychological effects via sensory organs, weaponry, including decimating our smell, all legal. Chemical incapacitation weapons, all legal. Look at all of the chemicals that we face. The constant overhead aerosolized death dumps called chemtrails or geoengineering. Look at the fog many of us recently experienced. Poisons and toxins. They also say that hostage terrorism is legal. What do we see happening right now? Hostage terrorism. It's legal. And they've designed this. They talk about psychological warfare or psy-war. All legal. They're doing this. Acoustic weaponry and mechanical micro dust they're dumping on us. Acoustic weaponry. I'm going to deviate from these fires and what you're watching right now with the Los Angeles County fires. It's not Los Angeles that's burning. It's Los Angeles. It's perimeters of Los Angeles County.
Right.
They're making it sound like LA is completely on fire, but it is not. Enough of it has been decimated, of course, and we're watching the horror, the heartache, the blood shock of people losing their homes. But if many of you have been listening to what Mel Gibson has been saying because he lost his home, he's got suspicions around why there wasn't water and why there weren't enough firefighting personnel. In fact, you've been hearing on the news that they defunded the firefighting efforts, and they didn't have enough fire crews and equipment that had been serviced to get up there and fight the fires. But they can't fight these fires.
Deborah, let me throw one thing in there. A good friend of mine, Bill, he lives not far from Palladia. He said about an hour. He's up in the mountains there. He said that, when you talk about weapons and you mention even the cell phone, he said, really and truly, he said, I hate to say it, Steve, he said, but they use the cell phone as a weapon. And he said, when I say a weapon, he said, I don't mean it in the conventional sort that you would think. He said, they got everybody to evacuate with their phones. He said, then they shut the water off. He said,
and there's no cell connection also.
Right. And he said, I went down there trying to help. He said, they wouldn't allow me to bring food in to the people that did stay behind. He said, it's just really been crazy. He said, the friend of mine that did stay, he said he was able to keep his house from burning down. He said, if it wasn't that they were doing this intentionally, he said you could have saved some houses. But one other thing I wanted to ask you real quick, and then I'll keep quiet so I can listen. But when we talk about the cell phone towers as being these weapons and the patents that you mentioned there, Deborah, I'm just trying to understand this. Is this the time when Donald Trump in his last presidency was trying to rush through putting together all this 5G network? Is that when they were really sticking all this up, or do you think it was done even before then?
There was a executive order by Trump requiring massive and hasty rollout of broadband to the very last farmhouse and on tribal lands throughout the United States. Rapid deployment, that's all 5G. Then there was also an executive order that was initiated through the Trump White House that to build out wastewater treatment plants, because in that executive order it said that because of the reduction of water and global warming, there wouldn't be enough water. So we would have to build wastewater treatment plants to treat fecal material, urine, and pharmaceuticals of undetermined poisonous levels so we can drink it. And this is known as toilet to tap. Now, we've been talking about this for a long time.
I remember
Now,
that last time we talked. I think we went into that issue then.
Well, we did, and it's important to note it's been brought up again because, of course, Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and others are testing wastewater treatment plants in communities to see the kinds of illnesses, and they are going to be able to lock down individual communities, and I'm going to tell you how. I'm going to deviate from the fire conversation right now just to leave it for the moment that we're watching a criminal crime scene unfurling right now, and they're already sending in demolition crews to haul out all of the debris, the toxic debris. That entire area with the poisons should be a Superfund site, and people should not be allowed to move in there. Sadly, the folks whose homes did stand, they will literally have to strip out the insulation from their ceilings and their walls, get rid of all the carpets and pads, and get rid of it all. Because what we found here in the 2017 fire that burned 5,000 homes here, and we went into the evacuation to pull and help people escape. That was also a weaponized fire as well. We found later, after people were starting to move back in, whose homes were still standing, that they were getting very sick in their homes, Steve, because of all of the poisonous toxic air pollutants. Now, it's important to understand the fires were created with microwaves. The winds were created also. And the fire and the smoke is another weapon. Now, look at the massive amount of smoke that is hanging all over the valley there, from San Gabriel to the Palisades on up to Ventura, all the way on down even to San Bernardino. There's air particulates. In fact, I want to start by saying this, and then I'll go where I will also tell you more of what's occurring. It's very, very important for all of you that are listening to be able to observe when the attack is going to be done, and you can see it. And here's how you can see it. We've been talking about that here since 2017, and now we know when an attack is going to occur. Here's what you look for. Now, it's going to have to move people out of the denial of chemtrails. That is a fact. And I will say, for those of you that are on the cusp of not being sure about that, that indicates your level of mind control. It does. It is here. You can see it. And if you don't, you are mind controlled. And I will talk more about how they've mind controlled the majority of the population. But here's what you look for. You look for in fire-prone areas, and everywhere is a fire-prone area. Even places that typically have hurricanes or floods or. But they have to move in the weapons, the scalar waves, and all of the weapons, the microwave weapons to present all of these horrific attacks on us. So you watch for days ahead of time, heavy chemtrailing, or the low fog that we were experiencing a few weeks ago. That is freshly dumping strontium, barium, and aluminum, which is literally freshening up the ability of combustibility for fires. Also, you look for humidity levels. Anything below 50% is combustible, a combustible level of lower humidity. we checked the humidity levels down in Malibu all the way through to San Gabriel. In those days of the fire, it was averaging 12%. 12%. And I just said anything under 50% is going to be able to cause combustibility with winds and heat. And they keep talking about how Los Angeles is in a drought. Yes, because they created the drought. They could put these fires out because they also can make it rain. So I want you all to think about this. Back, as just an example, back in the Vietnam War, the United States used weather weapons, on the Ho Chi Minh supply line, killing 1 million plus Vietnamese under Operation Popeye. Operation Popeye caused severe rain. And then at the same time, back in the use of Operation Popeye, we were using on Cuba, it was called Operation Nile Blue, or Blue Nile. And we were causing a drought. So here you have opposing uses of control of the weather. And in Cuba, they were trying to absolutely devastate the tobacco industry. They wanted to take over Cuba at that time. And that's why Cuba, up until now, because we were there a few years back, will not allow cell towers. I don't know if you realize that. They don't trust the cell towers. They know that they're weapons.
Smart.
I don't know if they've
Smart. That's
I don't
why.
know. I don't know if they've managed to keep them off or not off the island. But what were you saying, Steve?
No, I was saying that was smart. And I've also, as you're speaking about some of these things, Deborah, I tried to bring up some imagery to share with people to see exactly what you're talking about.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, so we're watching a crime scene in operation. Now, I've been on many criminal crime scenes with fires. I went up to the Paradise fires with my husband and some retired fire captains. That between the two of them had over 60 years in fighting fires. Now, we saw the smart meters had melted. They blow up. They can be pulsed. The utility companies that are all run by Rothschild, LLC, and Company worldwide. That's why there's a worldwide deployment of wireless electric smart meters, because they can shut your power off at will. If you eventually, when you overuse your allotted amount of electricity, your power will be shut off. Same thing with water. They're deploying wireless smart water meters worldwide. Here, our meters are in our sidewalks, and while we refused that deployment of the wireless water meter, it is on the sidewalk, and we came back to a property a week later, and they had put the wireless meter in. Now, I went to the county, and I found where the controllers, the receivers of all of the information from the wireless smart water meters was sent to. They're bathing us with frequencies beyond our ability to survive. Plain and simple. Everything is wireless. The smart meters. It is absolutely beyond our survivability what is happening. And so everyone here, of course, in California, we were able to get the opt-out. This was kind of in the mid-2000s. We certainly protested when I thought in those days that protesting mattered. Now they're just using acoustic weapons and microwaves on protesters. In fact, it is now confirmed that they were using weapons on the January 10th group at the White House. And they can exacerbate mood swings and change people's behavior. That's what we're seeing happening all over the world. Remember, I said our eyesight is dimming. That's all part of increased microwaves in our environment. And they make big money when you have macular degeneration or glaucoma, or your eyesight is dimming and you have to buy all new increased prescriptions. They are causing all of this. They're even using the amalgam fillings in your mouth as a weapon, because the vapor comes off of those fillings and minimizes, goes into your brain. Let's be blunt about this. It goes into the brain. So we're watching in real time, streaming live, the destruction that they are doing to destroy us all. This is a real-time show of the most unbelievable circumstance that you can watch. And people are suffering. I watched the people here suffering. I watched the slow process of rebuilding. And over the course of the last few years since those fires, I've talked to people that lost everything during those fires, and I was told a story from a man that's now deceased. But he was playing golf that day of October the 9th of 2017 during the fires here, the Tubbs fire, Tubbs fire, where we lost over 5,000 homes. He was playing on the golf course with some friends, and a wind passed by them so strong that it pushed him down on the grass at the golf course, and he just didn't understand it. All his friends thought, wow, that was very strange. That was an energy wave, folks, an energy wave. So I talked about how you can recognize disasters being plotted and when they're going to do it, because, again, you look at the humidity, you look at the level of current basting with toxic chemicals. We're already basted with the chemicals. 6 inches below the soil is toxic everywhere, worldwide. It's all poison. That's why things aren't growing. That's why they're dismantling the food supply. But so again, the low humidity, the dryness that they create, the winds, and then of course they shut the power off, they burn you up, and they don't have water. Now, it's very typical in all of these fires that there's no water. Let me talk about our experience here in 2017 and bring that forward. Here in 2017, in this beautiful upscale community, the builders were required to install huge water tanks. I don't know how many thousands of gallons each one held, but it was required as fire water for the mountain of these high-end homes when they built these homes. And that was to be, of course, used during fires and to have water for the hydrants. Interestingly enough, just before the fires, both of those water tanks were empty. And they claimed, they were doing seismic retrofitting on those fires. There was no water. They did the same thing in Paradise. And in many of the fires, there was no water. We saw there was no water in Lahaina. We also saw there was no water in the Palisades. Why? I'll tell you why. They're microwaves. You cannot put out microwave fires with water. It's like a Tesla blowing up. You've seen those blowing up. The
Right.
EV battery cars, they blow up. You don't put these out with fire. With water. Had they shown us that years back, that the water wasn't putting the fires out, they would have blown the cover of the lie of the microwave attacks. Plain and simple.
Well,
These
Deborah,
poor folks yes?
that would be the same issue then that happened in Southern California. Then, just like that, just proves your point that you just made. Like Bill was saying to me, he said they shut all the water off. He said, had we had water, he said, yeah, we had very high winds. He said, but we could have probably done something. But like you said, you can't put that kind of fire out with water, and they know it.
And that's why they shut the water off. And that
Wow.
reservoir, Santa Ynez Reservoir, that had been emptied for a very minor repair, was all part of the setting up for the attack. Make no mistake, this was planned in advance. The looters, just as we had here, we were told by the Sheriff's Department that the night and a few days after the fires here in 2017, they had looters roving through the fire zones. They were brought up in vans, hundreds of looters. Now, A group wrote a book after the fires here. They called it Point Patrol. I don't know if you get it on Amazon or whatever. But the book basically talked about, they were a group that stayed and fought, and it was a cul-de-sac. And they had all the hoses stretched out into the middle of the cul-de-sac, all live with water. And they were putting out spot fires and ember fires. But their biggest problem were the looters. And they had to paint on the street of the cul-de-sac, if you will be shot on sight if you come in here to try to loot. And they talked about having to have watches to keep the looters out. Now, when you are going to attack, naturally, you send in looters. So we're seeing looters as part of the attack mechanism. And a reason to keep the people out, because now they're saying as the military cordons off all those streets, just as they did here, so they can clean up all the criminality left behind. Every fire is a little different. The level of directional use of frequencies can be reduced or increased. And I'm not seeing the dustification of the buildings and structures in the Palisades in Altadena as we had here in the Tubbs fire, and certainly in the Paradise fire here. Things were dustified. It was like the World Trade Towers. Those are microwave weapons, period. Microwave weapons cause dustification. They dustify people too, FYI. But having said that, I want to go into some other aspects of which you all need to understand. We're on our own. Our government is attacking us. We're USA Inc. We are not a country. We're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. We're doing business. I've talked about this for years. Another way in which to measure the level of mind control that you might be in is, do you vote? If you vote, you believe in a two-party system that was set up when both sides are handled and controlled. Everything is scripted, and you're living within a script. We'll go over that a little more in a moment. But I want to talk about this, Steve.
Okay.
This is absolutely horrific. These are called catastrophe bonds, BONDS, catastrophe bonds. Now, I've posted that on my website, Steve. You're going to see it under the YouTubes on my site. It's a recent post. And what they're doing is they're predetermining mass loss and making money on it. And they talk about, the name of this video that you'll see, Steve, is called How to Make Billions with Fires, Hurricanes, and War. But they also make billions on floods and earthquakes, every kind of disaster. This is called planet finance, and they speculate on disaster. Are you hearing me? They're making profits on disaster. A friend of mine once told me this is disaster capitalism. But to be honest, I didn't understand him. He worked at the New York Stock Exchange, and those were his words. I didn't understand the bonds. I didn't understand until I heard this video. And I think if all of you listen to this, and I hope you can post that, Steve, for people to see
I'm actually looking for it right now because I got the videos opened.
Okay. I just posted it yesterday, and it is called How to Make Billions with Fire, Hurricanes, and War. But then as you listen to it, they make billions on every kind of planned disaster. And this is planet finance. So let's talk about this and how they speculate on disasters, because it's catastrophe for sale. And they say crazy opportunities to put mass amounts of money to work. Mass amounts of money. We're talking probably dark money. We're talking probably child trafficking money, a lot of fraudulent money laundering money. Who knows where that money's coming from? But they do tell us that it's corporate funds. Many insurance companies are putting their money into disaster capitalism. Some banks and retirement funds. And they're going to be betting big now on cyber risks and attacks, because that's what we face now too. So they talk about how you can predict if you can understand what the future holds. And I am telling you what the future holds. And I'm going to go over what we're told in the climate action plans, that all of your local city officials on every level, every agency, from school boards to your county boards of supervisors to every agency you can think of, it doesn't matter. They all subscribe to the idea of global warming or climate change. You type it in. Type in any agency in your town and find out the position of climate change. Do they agree with climate change? They do. And you know that that is how we're being controlled, the illusion of climate change, that we must reduce our CO2 emissions. Excuse me? That's oxygen. The plants need CO2 to make oxygen for us. And right now, all of you that are sending your children to school, your kids are learning that global warming and climate change equates to too many people using too much stuff. Their futures are being built upon lies right now. Right now.
Yes.
You need to unschool your kids immediately. Take them out of these propagandized institutions that are changing our world and killing us all, because these kids are coming out. I'm watching them. They're graduating from high school, and they don't even want to drive a car because they feel it's too polluting. But it's okay to hire Uber and have Uber take them to a minimum wage job. And back and forth on Uber, they spend as much on getting there with Uber as they make in a day with a minimum wage job. This is what we're teaching our kids. So we go on to these catastrophe bonds, and these they operate where buildings and disasters aren't covered by insurance, and they're insuring destruction too large for our insurance companies to cover. And we're going to live in nothing but destruction too large for insurance to cover. They're canceling insurance right and left. You've heard that. You've heard how they canceled policies in the Pacific Palisades. Well, they're canceling policies all out throughout California and other states as well, because other states are prone to other types of weaponized microwave attacks. And so they're modeling for the floods, for example, 100 years of modeling and data, and they're measuring the water levels of the floods and how high it could be, and they're buying bonds. They're placing money into these disaster money-making business, which our world is based upon now, disasters. It's all disasters with weaponization of the weather entirely. And they are looking to invest between $10 and $20 trillion in these types of investment and more. I hope you're hearing me.
They're making more money now than Deborah with this type of disasters than they are with wars, no doubt. And I found your video here on Rumble with your channel. So definitely, guys, you want to subscribe to this. Stop the Crime is Deborah's her Rumble channel there, and how to make billions with forest fires, hurricanes, and wars. Planet Finance, FD Finance. Got to watch it.
You've got to. Now let me talk a little bit more about that, and then I'm moving on. They talk about that in the U.S. there are many stubborn people, and they will not evacuate, and they will prevent the disaster from being as large as it is. In other words, they're causing problems for the disaster investment bonds, people that will not leave. And they'll lessen. They talk about in this video, Steve, the effects of stubborn people that will stay and prevent the disaster from being worse. And they talk about the percentage that these stubborn people in the United States will cause to the ability to make as much money as they otherwise could.
Deborah, I don't mean to interrupt, but I've got to say, I remember in 2017 when you were texting me, you and Lou, you guys refused to leave yourself.
That's right.
And I remember, I mean, it was almost horrifying because you were surrounded by the fire. I remember you saying, "This may be our last," and I was so worried about you guys, and I'm thinking, I wanted you to leave. I have to be honest because I was worried about you guys, right? But you guys, you just would not bow down to the hierarchy that wanted you to do that.
Well, here's the determination of evacuating or not. Um, our area, we had met with the retired fire captain, and we talked about how to harden up our properties. We talked about the need for roof sprinklers, and that we needed to put, for example, sponges in our downspouts where our gutters were, so that the water that was being sprayed from our roof would trough in our gutters. So when the embers were flying around, and they would roll into the water trough, and we had to cover our vents. We moved all doormats, umbrellas, everything so that nothing could easily ignite. And we were able to water the perimeter of our property with sprinklers. We also have people that have a lot of topside water tanks. Now, this is what we're all going to need going forward if you're in a fire-prone area, and every area is prone to the fires now. There are no borders for fires. We're seeing that there's no borders for tornadoes. Places that never had tornadoes before are having all kinds of disastrous circumstances. Yes. In fact, we had an earthquake here on the West Coast. Some of you may have heard about it a few weeks back. And it was actually the use of a nuke blast in the ocean of Humboldt Bay. And I forget what the Richter scale of that earthquake was, but then it was followed by a tsunami warning from Northern California all the way up into Oregon. They even evacuated a school of a child that we know well that was just over the California border. They made all the kids walk to higher ground. Now, I have to tell you, all of you that are listening, you need to understand what we face. I would recommend that you talk to your kids about the reality that they're in. Because if you stop lying to them because you don't know yourself, they actually will be safer. They will be able to respond to disasters in ways in which they can mentally prepare. I would leave that right now there. But the catastrophe bonds are absolutely horrifying. Now let's talk about this. And Steve, maybe you can find this on my website. Maybe I forwarded it to you. I hope I did. We've known for a long time about the 15-minute cities and the forced relocation of all of us into what I call kill cities, because everything is wireless, everything is controlled with smart meters on everything, and Wi-Fi. Very expensive. You may be seeing these cities being built around you now. They're usually 3-story or 5-story buildings. The reason in California that they're 3 stories is they're not required to put in elevators. But in anything over a 3-story, they have to put in elevators. Now, my husband and I went to such a build-out, 180 units of leased housing only, where a small 2-bedroom, 1-bath was leasing out at $2,500 a month. That did not include the payment of your utilities, which are skyrocketing now. They'll skyrocket. In fact, I've got to add this in right now. I was talking to some friends in the UK, and right now they're under, or at least a few days back, they were under a weather watch because of heavy snow and icy streets. They were told, and flooding, to stay at home. They were very concerned, though, because the UK hasn't shifted over to renewable energy entirely, but they've shifted off of the ability to utilize natural gas for the heating, which everybody is using natural gas for heating. Steve, they said they only had a week's worth of natural gas for these folks to heat their homes in the UK.
Wow.
A week's worth. Now, that would go into another conversation of hardening up. Make certain that you have generators, you have backups to the backups to the backups. You have generators that are electric, that are gas, that you have My Buddy propane heaters that you can use in your homes. You need to go and get these things. Many of my friends right now can't get them because of the Arctic blast that parts of our country is struggling with right now. All of these things are being sold out. So you've got to start making a list. Here's something I would recommend. You don't have to turn your power off, but don't use any lights, don't use any water. Tape your light switches so you don't accidentally, inadvertently slip a light on, because you're going to pretend you're in a power outage. And you're not going to have water, you're not going to, your refrigerators, your phones you can't charge, everything. You just do this for 3 days. Make a list of everything you're going to use when this happens, and it will. They're going to take down the grid more broadly and more frequently for longer periods of time. That is already being done.
Yes.
Under the various attack systems, we're watching massive power outages all over the country, all over the world. They're moving us into darkness without electricity, without gas. In fact, what they're saying in this new world of digital currency and social credit scores, that you'll be given the use of gas, if they still have it. It'll be electric. It'll be forced to all be electric, so that you can have some hot water. It'll depend on your social credit score, because they can remotely turn off and on people's wireless smart meters for gas and or electricity remotely. Here in California, they have a safety switch, though, where they can turn off areas, because PG&E Rothschild was attacked viciously with lawsuits, but they've recouped all the money they've paid out through the energy customers. I can say that. So let's talk about, I'm going to go into mind control, because I see that as being one of the largest problems that we face. I don't know how many of you are watching people since, of course, the entire COVID situation. The people just aren't present. They're walking around. They don't look up. They're just in a daze, a haze, whatever you want to call it. I'm noticing that everywhere. Many people are noticing that. Anyway, this is a document on my website, Steve, and you can find it. Just type in the search on stopthecrime.net. Type in Aquarius, Aquarius, and you will find this document that was sent to me by a whistleblower many years ago. I have talked about this consistently over the years, and I'm reminded that this is still one of the most important documents that I have. So let's go over it briefly. Okay, it's the planned chemical sedation of the populations by the use of radio microwave frequencies for mass mind control. Now, I want to say that they've accomplished this back in the mid-90s. This is advanced. We have sleeper cells throughout this country that are triggered to drive vehicles down our streets and mow people down. We have sleeper cells that will be sent out at the fires, like they're saying that arsonists have gone out to these fires, and they'll show these people wandering around with fire-related combustible items, and they say, we caught the arson that started the fire and burned down a whole city, right? That's to keep you off the understanding that they've used microwaves. And certainly they use boots on the ground. There's no question. But most folks now are realizing the enormity of the mind control. And on page 1, for example, these are just a few excerpts from the Aquarius Group Operations Briefing. On page 1, they say electromagnetic radio waves and microwave pulse mind warfare has great advantages in that the desired subject, individuals, or a population has no knowledge of the procedure being implemented. They go on to say on page 2, mind control, chemical and polypharmaceutical saturation has been achieved over the past 20 years. Now, I've had this document on my site 10 plus years, so we're saying more than 30 years, has been achieved over the past 30 plus years of implementation with this purpose in mind, and is achieved by deliberate, overt introduction through exposure or consumption on behalf of the population base in everyday usage of public water supplies, airborne pollutants, and chemical agents in a wide variety of foodstuffs. They talk about the plan and also the lone wolf. And we know that the Aquarius Group Operations Briefing connects to the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars document that we've been talking about for many years, and the NASA War Plan that I've mentioned a few excerpts earlier in this broadcast, and further illustrates the massive covert plan for global manipulation, enslavement, and genocide. Now, all of this has been predicted. We're running in a scripted reality. We've been told. But how many really listened? The larger the lie, the more impossible it is to believe the truth. Now let's briefly run over the smart cities, the 15-minute cities, the reimagining plans that you're hearing being discussed in the Pacific Palisades to make way for the Olympics and for a smart city. Let's talk about that. We've been told about this because for so many years, Dr. Michael Kaufman, who was killed recently, by the way, in the 90s, was at a meeting and he heard about what is called the Wildlands Project. And he brought the map. He flew immediately to Washington, D.C. to tell them not to vote on this. And, of course, they did, all right? Just like, Steve, I want to thank both you and Yana for the interviews with Dr. Lorraine Day about the Noahide laws, because I didn't know that in 1991, by stealth and deception, the Noahide laws were adopted in this country, which allows for the killing of believers, whatever faith you are. At the same time, we knew that in 1988, under Reagan, they passed the Genocide Treaty, and that also allowed for the killing and murdering of any faith-based religions in this country.
Yes.
And that's what's happening also worldwide. This is the burning of churches and so forth. But let's get into this Wildlands Project. It's showing, the map shows where human access is denied. And this was mandated by the United Nations Biodiversity Treaty and forced transformation and relocation of all Americans and cities to comply with the environmental policies and reduction of CO2 emissions. Now, we have just, talked about CO2 as oxygen. Why are people going along with this? Why are they allowing the reduction of oxygen, which they are doing? They are reducing our oxygen supply. And I learned more about that, but this is another discussion on another show later, Steve. But this map, and the purpose of this map, is it shows core reserves and corridors that will allow little or no human use. And they tell us that 50% of the U.S. is returned to wilderness. Now, this is why you're seeing all these different agencies buying up large swaths of land to add to the forest or to be buffer zones, which will also be and are highly regulated use. Again, authorized humans only in buffer zones. And then they talk about that all humans will be forced into designated settlement reserves. And the map also shows the Indian reservations, the military reservations, and the color on the map, which we've broken out, you can see where human access is allowed. And that's very few places in the United States, by the way. We also are seeing that most of the U.S. roads are not being repaired, the infrastructure is not being maintained, because they don't intend for us to be able to travel. And I want to talk about that a bit right now. And Steve, I'm stunned, and I'll try to send to you a picture. I am standing by a newly deployed sensor that was recently deployed. These are going up by the thousands throughout the United States. The one that I saw, which I took a camera shot of and I researched it, it's called Sun Surveillance, S-U-N, surveillance. In looking it up, well, here's what they look like. We saw a concrete slab being poured, maybe 4 feet by 4 feet, and we wondered what that was. And then about a week or so later, they erected this 16-foot high metal pole, thick, and at the top it has solar panels and a camera and boxes down low where they get adjusted. Now, when I went on the Sun, S-U-N, surveillance website, here's what I learned. And I will tell you, though, first, I think it's Newark right now. They've got a lawsuit going up against the deployment because these folks are saying it's breaching privacy in the Constitution. There is no breach in privacy. We are owned. We are slaves. And there is no Constitution. I hope by now many of you realize that the Constitution has been trampled over. Sadly.
Yes.
But the Sun surveillance system, they say they're deploying them for your safety, to be able to view in real time, all the time, road conditions. And in this situation of this one, the installer was asked, well, why are you putting this up? And they said, well, it's a flood area, and we'll be able to divert people. Well, they caused the floods. And then the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and you all have fish and wildlife agencies everywhere, they won't allow people to clean out the creeks. They allow the silt to build up, and they're diverting creeks and rivers intentionally. And so it's a diverted creek that has caused flood damage and road inability to access in and out of properties when they use an atmospheric river dump on us, again, all weapons, so that they can see us 24/7, 365 from these surveillance cameras. Now let's go into the surveillance cameras. These are geofences. They can add more to these poles, just like we see throughout the country. They're adding more to the cell phone towers because the cell phone towers host many different carriers' antennas, and it makes them all more deadly. But having said that, they can host blue lights that literally pulse and can cause blindness, because we all need blue light blockers, right? We should all have blue light blockers in our glasses.
And it's used for mind control.
I'm sorry?
Blue light has also been proven to be used for mind control.
Absolutely. So here's what they're deploying throughout our country right now, in plain sight. Sun surveillance. So in this particular deployment, they have the camera only right now. This is all the functions that will be added to this pole go to AI, goes to our fire, our police, and sheriffs, and it can all be hacked. It's all wireless. It can all be hacked. So it's going to host drones. The reason that they're reducing the police force is they're going to be using drones to control the populations. They're going to know where you are in real time, and it also brings in pre-crime. Honestly, pre-crime. Why do you think right now Thiel has been brought into the administration, who runs Palantir? He's the data analyticals that run pre-crime, like the Minority Report. These data analyticals were already deployed after Hurricane Katrina. Help me with that word, Steve.
Katrina.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you. Sometimes I think faster than my mouth works. Anyway, those are deployed already throughout the country for pre-crime. And so those are deployed, and these will be pre-crime as well. They can weave a story about you as you travel through these cameras. Again, as I said, they will cause heart attacks. They will cause strokes as they mount more of the equipment on them. And again, they will host the drones, and AKA slaughter bots. This is all real. We're seeing the drones being used exponentially now overseas in warfare. In fact, I have a very good friend that lives in that family is in the Ukraine. She's Ukrainian, and there are streets that the Ukrainians know to not go down because of the increased drones, and they're dustifying people. They've got weapon systems on these drones that poof, you're gone. You're just gone, completely gone. All kinds of horrific use of microwave and weapon systems. So what we now know too is that they're using, as in the Havana syndrome of acoustic weapons. It was not a syndrome. It was a government deployment of a weapon system to injure people's brains. They're now using the acoustic weapons all over the world. Many people are getting injured all over the world now. Many of you are already injured from all of the weapons that you maintain in your homes for the ease of connectivity. The Wi-Fi, the wireless of it all in your homes, the smart meters of it all in your homes. Many of you don't understand about what they're doing with the energy in your wires of your house. I've done so many interviews about dirty electricity, and all the government agencies know. They're all in it. In fact, here, many of you know, of course, that our governor, not my governor, but the governor that operates for the deep state, Gavin Newsom, of course, he's related to Nancy Pelosi. They're all related, okay, but he calls her Aunt Nancy. Anyway, I want to get back, too, about the water, because I could go on forever about all of these things, Steve, but I want to go into the water. This is critical. For those of you that have not watched Chinatown, I would recommend you watch the movie Chinatown. You will see back during those days the illusion that was created of not having water. Those water barons and thieves during that period of time literally dumped the water that was available to farmers and ranchers for growing oranges into the ocean. And they were convincing the farmers and ranchers there wasn't water. So they would buy up land for very little money. And then ultimately build the California aqueduct. Now, what you're going to hear me say right now is going to sound crazy, but all of it, what we're talking about, we're all living in crazy. So we just have to man up and understand what we face so that we can mentally adjust and maybe make some decisions on how to survive in crazy. So the aqueduct was built to manage and control the water and to set up a system of dams. Now, many of you are drinking reservoir water. And what we discovered in FEMA documents is they're using dams and reservoirs as weapons. They're taking out dams all over the world, and they're also poisoning the dams. They're horrific, toxic cauldrons of water that they pump into the municipal water supply for people to drink and take showers in. You should not even swim in a reservoir because of all the toxic algae bloom and all the bacteria and the increased levels of poisons that are dumped from the chemtrails and all of the PFAS that's in the water. All of the poisons everywhere in the water. The surface water of the entire world is poisonous. So what they did in California in those early days, as presented in the Chinatown movie, which I would urge you all to watch because this
That's
is
the
all...
1974 version, correct, Deborah?
I don't remember the year.
Okay.
But it could be. Yes,
Okay.
it could be. Anyway, it involves theft, lies, a creation of a water system that has now taken over the United States and the rest of the world with utilizing aqueducts and dams and reservoirs. We never needed to have dams and reservoirs because we always had primary water. And just like in Libya in 2011, the United States blew up the Great Man-Made River Project, where they had spent their oil profits to benefit the people, and they implemented they dug for primary water. We're the water planet. Primary water, pure, fresh, clean drinking water exists everywhere. Where you're standing right now, somewhere in that close proximity, you could probably douse for a drill for primary water that's not polluted in topside atmospheric water in higher aquifers. Having said that, so we're on a water system that we've been lied about. We're built on nothing but lies, and we're built on nothing but weapons systems. Everyone needs to understand this. So let's talk about what's in the climate action plans that all of your cities adopted worldwide. These are adopted worldwide. You just need to type in the name of your city. For example, I would type in Santa Rosa, California. Santa means Satan. Satan's Rose, California. But actually, I'll just say it. It's Santa Rosa, California. And I would type in after that, I adopted climate action plans. And I've read so many over the many years. I've downloaded so many in every country, everywhere, worldwide. They're the same plans. And they all came out of the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit of 1992. And they built upon that. But prior to the Earth Summit, the report from Iron Mountain talked about what we would face. And the report from Iron Mountain talks about, this was released after John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And President Johnson said it was a hoax. It was not real. It is real. I would go online if you can still find it. I found it interesting that it seems to be difficult to find. I hope I still have it on my website because I've been so mercilessly attacked that, I've been so mercifully attacked. But you can download the actual report itself, the report from Iron Mountain. You can also watch a YouTube version that was put together by a group that we had permission to utilize that YouTube. And I've given many talks with playing the report from Iron Mountain as I'm describing what the plan is. And it's a takeover by the United Nations to create a one world government and to control all resources. And no one escapes this. No one is safe. And this is real. But people did not believe it. It's so horrific. People did not believe it. So let's go and talk about how you make money in disaster capitalism, because they tell us right in our climate action plans that all of your local presumed representatives that don't represent you, because we're run on autopilot, everything is prescripted, and every person that votes in your city or you think represents you is running these plans and taking grants to further cause debt in your cities for these smart streets, these smart areas for parking, all of this, they're signing over city resources. They're collateralizing against your cities that will be bankrupted. But here is just one example on one of the many pages of the climate change effects. And they talk about how they'll increase hunger and decrease nutrition because of all of the climate change events that will happen. They talk about the climate change effects, and then they talk about examples of human health risks. So they talk about increase in extreme heat events. We're being microwaved. Last summer, many people's orchards, apple orchards, and fruit trees were so microwaved in the late afternoon when people wouldn't recognize they were increasing the microwaves, that cankers were happening on the sides of the trees in the late afternoon. And now many people are now painting white water-based paint on the trunks of their trees because the foliage isn't even that thick anymore to create a canopy to shade the trunks of the trees. They're reducing our food supply. I see it right in front of me. You just need to open your eyes and you'll see it. So again, increase extreme heat events. We're going to have massive deaths from increased heat. There will be heat-related illnesses and death and worsening of chronic health conditions. Now, I want to say this. About 3-4 months ago, we were being microwaved here in Northern California. Now, don't think it's only in California. It's happening everywhere worldwide. But someone we knew was cooked in Red Bluff, California. That would be just before Shasta, the mountain that you might hear about a lot. Was cooked in their home and died. And another friend had to go and rescue their animals. And because all their animals were in the house with their dead owner. That owner was cooked. Now, I know this is a graphic illustration, but this will happen more and more. Elderly people will die from the heat because when they increase the power outages, people won't have air conditioning. They won't be able to cool themselves. So let's talk about this. Increased air pollution. Let's talk about what they tell us that will cause. These are in these books. Increased respiratory illness and seasonal allergies, which seasonal allergies are created, guys. They're creating the allergies that we're suffering from. And then we go get the poisonous chemicals and medications that Big Pharma makes money on because they're creating the illnesses. Let's talk about floods, droughts, wildfires, storms, and changes in weather patterns. And here's what they tell us in the climate action books. It will cause injury, death, respiratory illnesses, waterborne illnesses, foodborne illnesses, displacement, stress-related disorders, mental health impacts, increased shift in infectious diseases. They go on, higher food prices and food scarcity, which is happening now, increased hunger and decreased nutrition. And then they talk about sea level rise. That is a fallacy. There isn't sea level rise. They're increasing storm events and creating the illusion that there's sea level rise because they're able to manufacture and they cause it. And I want to say this. I don't know if you've covered this, Steve, or not. We may want to cover this in another show. But there is a Rockefeller Foundation document dated July the 28th of 2020 on how they will be resetting our tables. It's called Reset the Table, meeting the moment to transform the U.S. food system. Transform the U.S. food system. So let's talk about that for a minute. We have cattle ranches here north of San Francisco that have been using government land to graze their cattle. Last week, 3 of the 6 remaining dairies have now been shut down because they won't extend the leases. Right here, right now, here in Northern California, and you have to think this for your area too. I'm only explaining what I know is happening here, but it's happening everywhere. They are no longer allowing well drilling, and they've essentially created a moratorium on being able to build in the WUI, the wildland-urban interface. In other words, if you are outside of the city growth boundary, where you're supposed to be incarcerated in these kill cities or 15-minute cities, if you're outside of that in the country and you don't have a well, you can't drill one. And how they're putting this out here is they're saying the federal and state government, the federal, which we're being told we're going to have big changes. No, we're not. The noose is tightening and we're going to be lynched. So understand that, first of all. Nobody's coming to save us. We're really all on our own, and we have to do this out of love and out of concern and care for people that we associate with, because we're all in trouble, and we really, truly are on our own. Each of us needs to harden up as best we can to be less easy to be killed in the short term. But here in my area, in Sonoma County, the federal and state has required that well drilling meets environmental requirements. They have to have environmental acceptance that the drilling of wells is not taking water, which they believe and are selling all of us, that it's a finite resource, there's not much water, and that wells are taking water away from their neighbors, because they're saying it should be a shared resource. We have primary water. Primary water is a renewable. It's created by the process of hydrogen and oxygen down below the mantle, and as that merges, it creates vapor and it surfaces, or you can drill it. We know a couple of wells in a volcanic area right above Los Angeles. They call it the Ridge Route or the Tehachapi area, that Paul Power drilled a few years ago. Stevie drilled one well at 65 feet, another well at only 100 feet, and it's volcanic material there. And each well was pumping over 1,000 gallons a minute.
Wow.
So had LA wanted to address their water problem, they would have been able to have this was a private person that drilled this water. They have endless amounts of water. But they could have brought that down into LA with many more wells and brought down primary water. And again, that's what Muammar Gaddafi did in Libya before the United States blew up the Great Man-Made River Project. He accessed primary water and was delivering it for free to many, many villages. And I can say to you that we don't need the aqueducts. We don't need the dams and the reservoirs. That was all created to poison the water supply, literally create our inability to function in a world that has been pre-designed. We're living in a scripted reality. So I went over a lot of documents right now, but I also want to go over this document that I'm hunting for right this second, and here it is. I don't know how many of you have ever heard about this document, but I've certainly disclosed many documents over the years, certainly Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, the NASA War document. There's a lot of documents that are posted on my resource tab on stopthecrime.net. There's a document called, I can't think of it right now. We'll talk about it on another show, but we're going to talk about the Illuminati Secret Covenant right now. Have you ever discussed that previously on the show, Steve?
I have not, Deborah. I have not.
Okay, we're going to do that right now, because people need to understand what they face and what has been created to create the life that we're all moving into, and it's horrific. And we're all really going to have to rely on each other to survive what has been scripted in advance. We're all slaves within a scripted reality. And when you understand the scripts, then you can make some informed decisions on how you're going to survive within these scripts. So it is called, and it's posted on stopthecrime.net, it's called The Secret Covenant, the Illuminati Secret Covenant. So let's go into it a bit here. They say that they have created an illusion to be so big and so large and so vast, it will escape our perception. And I think all of you could agree with what you're hearing discussed tonight, with being attacked with weapons that cause all kinds of weather events. And then you're hearing about the catastrophe bonds and on and on and on. So again, an illusion will be so large and so vast it will escape our perception. And those who see it will be thought of as insane or conspiracy theorists. Wouldn't you know? They will create separate fronts to prevent us from seeing the connection between them. And they go on, I'm just going to pull excerpts out of this, and we can go in more detail at another time, Steve, but it tells us this, that those in control, or actually we will all be blanketed by poisons everywhere. Everywhere we turn, the soft metals will cause us to lose our minds. Hello?
Yes.
Yep, that's happening. That they will promise to find a cure for our many fronts, and yet they will feed us more poison. That's happening. The poisons will be absorbed through our skin and mouths, and they will destroy our minds and reproductive systems. From all of this, our children will be born dead or deformed, and they will conceal all this from us, that they're doing this to us. The poisons will be hidden in everything that surrounds us, from what we drink, eat, breathe, and even our clothes. So I want to add in right now, I have posted on stopthecrime.net, and if you can't find it easily, you can just type in a recent investigation that was done about PFAS. 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 It's sludge from wastewater treatment plants that the farmers have been given as a fertilizer. They have contaminated more food growing production in the middle of our country than any other poison being used by farmers. You will find that the farmers have high levels of deadly PFAS in their blood, and they can't sell what they grow. In fact, they're shutting down farms because you cannot. It's a forever chemical. It's in plastics. It's in raincoats. In fact, high PFAS blood levels exist in firefighters and in all of us. Because they can evaporate and move the weather through this country and pull moisture out of the ground, they're moving the PFAS onto all lands, everywhere. So you can look up the information that was recently disclosed after a couple of years of heavy investigation by some teams to understand the level of PFAS contamination. And this would certainly poison all our groundwater supplies and all the soil. But moving away from that, they say that they will be ingenious in dispensing the poisons that we cannot see. And they talk about how they will control all aspects of our lives, and they will convince us so that we don't recognize that they're controlling all aspects. Again, we're in a pre-scripted world. They will make us rip each other's hearts apart and kill our own children because we're sending them off to war, right? We're killing our own children because they control the wars. Remember, they're even betting money on the level of destruction, which includes wars. If you read the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars document, again, it's on my website, you'll see the intentionality behind the wars and that they're using us as cannon fodder. And they're using weaponized methods on war zones. I mean, we know that they were using Agent Orange widely in Vietnam. Now look at what they're doing. They're dumping everything on our soldiers, vaccinating them up and sending them off to be poisoned with new poisons and new types of warfare that we can't even fight against. And I want to just say this too. I was talking today to my retired fire captain friend who knows that the fires are all microwave fires. And I asked him how long before he retired from the fire service was he aware of what was being done. And he said, well, he knew for a very long time about the chemtrails. He did not know about the microwave weapons being used on our fire here in 2017 until after they burned us out. And then he accompanied us on criminal crime fire investigations. And I will say, Steve, we had black helicopters flying over us when we were out on these burn zones.
Yes.
And we had one instance where a black car pulled up, and we were in the middle of a burned out area where no one else was because everything was burned up. And here it jets down the road and pulls next to us and wants to know what we're doing. Because they're out there, they know that they're doing this to us. It's horrific. I can say it's horrific. So let's go over a few more things in this document. Again, these are quick excerpts, not everything. But they say that they will accomplish their goals also by using hate as their ally and anger as their friend. So what are they doing? They're creating hate and anger everywhere. The hate will bind us totally, and never will we ever see from their conflicts, our conflicts. They will emerge as our rulers. They will be busy killing while we're busy killing each other. And they go on to talk about they will continue to make our lives and live our lives in fear and anger through images and sounds. What are they doing? Live streaming death and murder that they create on all these fronts of weapon attacks and the wars. We're watching live movies every day on the death and destruction and murder of people. So that certainly most of the young kids don't think murder is a big deal.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. And then they say that we must never know that color is an illusion. We're talking about browns, blacks, whites, yellow, whatever nationality or color. That we must never find out that color is an illusion. And we must always think that we're not all equal. They created that. They've done all of this, and drop by drop by drop, they will advance their goals. It's been drop by drop by drop.
Yes.
They will take over our land. They're doing that. They'll take over our resources. Done. And wealth. They will exercise full control over us. And they will deceive us into accepting laws that will steal what little freedom we all have left. Done. They're doing that. We're watching that happening in real time. If you want to know what is in store for you, read Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Read the NASA War Document. I've done many, many videos on the NASA War Document. You just need to hear it. I have a video trending right now. Steve, maybe you can find it. I've been told that it's trending on X, etc. It's an interview I did a number of years ago with Trevor Ford Coppola. Maybe I said that earlier in the show. Don't remember. But in any thing, and it's called, I think it's called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. In any event, people can find it. A lot of the interviews that I've done over the years connecting the dots with the documents are now exploding. People weren't ready to hear a lot of that information back in those days. But now, after a very painful many years of finding out these and looking at these documents and reading, I don't know what to say. I really don't know what to say. Great harm occurring to everybody now. such great harm. Wouldn't you agree, Steve?
Absolutely, it is. And, Deborah, we are definitely, I think I just found it too, Silent Weapon for Quiet Wars. Yeah, I found it on Twitter here. They've got you're actually in a video talking about this here, where someone has shared this. So I've been trying to keep up and find different articles and things of you as you've talked about them, Deborah, both on your website. And interestingly enough, when you mentioned about all this money that they make from all these natural disasters, there's
Not natural. All
oh
these weaponized
yes, you're
disasters.
right, weaponized disasters. There's a interesting article that I pulled up how the rich profit, and they put it from natural disasters, but it just goes to show that they're profiting from all this evil that they're doing, and
Absolutely.
you know,
They're wiping us out, stealing our land, our resources. We're going into a digitized reality. And once that happens, we're done. We're close
right,
to done, but we're going to be done. Everybody is online paying their bills. They're not going to the banks anymore. They're not writing checks. They say in that disaster bond that they'll be making a lot of money on cyber attacks,
right.
and we already see that happening. I wanted to throw this in because this is a document. Let me see if I actually found it. I'm trying to find the
I'm
patent.
going to link some of these that are, even though they're on your website, because I did like the Aquarius document. I'm going to put direct links to it, to some of these that you've talked about tonight, to make it a little bit easier for people to help to keep from having to navigate as much. But of course, all you have to do is, like Deborah says in her website, like stopthecrime.net, just go to that search bar right there and then type in those keywords that Deborah says. It'll pull you right to the video there. You click on the link, it'll take you to it. And of course your website, this the toxicsky.org. That's something that you guys, many of you have probably never heard of this one before, but you definitely want to check that out as well. And
Now, I stopped using toxicsky.org. Initially, I created that site because my very dear friend Rosalind Peterson, who ran California Skywatch and Agriculture Defense Coalition, she was a USDA lost crop claims inspector. And many crops were dying, and it was up to her to figure out why. And she was taking these dead and dying plants to the lab. And she then discovered, much to her shock, that it was all airborne. And that's when she fell into understanding
right,
the geoengineering or the chemtrailing. And Rosalind, on her own dime, went to the United Nations, I think it was in New York, where she went, and she asked them to please stop and reconsider what they were doing in changing the weather because they were destroying the plants.
Harold Villa did the same thing with the German government and discovered the exact same thing from his study, the death of botany life, etc., that it was coming from the chemtrails.
Right, and I want to explain, we're hearing and we're seeing that we're being told that when we see the cities being burned up and the trees are still standing, that's because they can calibrate the weapons to only hit certain buildings, certain things, and to avoid the decimation of all the trees. And so people are saying the trees aren't hit, they're green. No, the trees and the shrubs are not okay anywhere worldwide. They have been massively diminished because of the decades of heavy metals. They can't uptake the moisture when they're allowed to have moisture, and many are dying. We're seeing that happening here in Northern California. In fact, the last apple processing plant here in Sonoma County that was owned by the French, Illuminati, is closing down, leaving all the small apple-producing farmers without a place to take their apples for making the different products that they've always taken the apples to before. They're going to be shutting down the apple orchards here because there's nowhere to take the fruit. And I would imagine that soon that will be replaced by olives. And the process of olives, as many of you may know, aspects of processing olives are very toxic, and you're supposed to leave aspects of that olive processing in vats and not release it into the ground for 6 or so months. You can look this up for yourself, or it adds to poison. So it would stand to reason that they would further encourage olives because of the process. In any event, the secret covenant, it's horrific. It's in line with the other documents that I've gone over through the years. But in order to prepare, you need to understand what you face. You cannot prepare if you don't know what you face. And I can tell you right now, we should not be drinking water and using rainwater catchment. You will find in that video or in the movie on toxicsky.org, Unconventional Gray, Michael Murphy, who is the filmmaker and put that together and interviewed a number of people I know to put that movie together. He not only lived along different coastal areas in Southern California, he actually came from, he didn't initiate his living on the California coast initially, but he also lived in Lahaina, and he discovered that the indigenous Hawaiian natives in Lahaina have been being served up rainwater catchment as their water system. And you'll see that he discloses a lab reports on the amount of aluminum that was in the water supply. They were killing those indigenous Hawaiian people in Lahaina before they burned them out. They already had initiated a slow kill on all those people. Drop by drop by drop. So watch that movie. Watch him standing there in Lahaina going over that. Of course, he was murdered well before the burn in Lahaina. Now, keep in mind that these weapon systems can be calibrated. So when you saw what you saw in Lahaina, and you saw, for example, they're using also blue lasers, and that's why you're seeing things that were blue standing. They weren't burning up. And that's because of the color and the frequencies of the blue lasers. They are not hitting. The blue color is not absorbing the laser and the energy. That's what we're seeing. We also heard also that there were a number of blue trucks or cars in the burning of parts of LA County that did not burn. So they're using different systems. They're polishing up the various ways that they're attacking us. So as we become more aware of the ways that they're attacking us, they can change it up to add more confusion.
Wow.
But blue lasers, we all have to wear
I've got a
blockers.
picture of one, Deborah, that Bill sent me. His friend took the picture. He said he didn't even know what the heck it was. He said, just I take a picture, and the next thing I know, I got this blue-looking laser thing, and I didn't know what to think about it at first. So I hadn't even published it yet because I hadn't heard of it until you actually mentioned it now.
Well, I just want to say that we're all under mass attack.
Yes.
We're all being led by people that either are under mind control to the extent that they're facilitating the death and destruction on all of us, or they're in on it, believing that there's going to be a payout for them at the end. They won't, those that are in control, I'm assured, will not allow those that do this to all of us. They won't survive. They're just being used right now.
Right.
They're using us to implement the tools of our destruction. And many of our jobs are implementing the tools of our destruction. Look at all the folks that work for the utilities that put in the wireless smart meters. Now, again, in California, I mentioned we have the opt-out. The reason we were given the opt-out when we were fighting against the deployment of the meters is because we were creating such rebel rousing here in Northern California with many groups that had converged. And we were literally closing down Edison buildings and not allowing them to put the meters on our homes. And yet the local newspapers would not report on any of this. Our groups would invite the local newspapers to film one of the protests because they had an unmarked building here that they were bringing in truckloads of the smart meters and offloading them, and then scurrying around the communities when people were at work and taking off their safe analog meters that were tried and true and putting on these smart meters. And so because it wasn't getting out and the newspapers weren't picking it up, I decided one day when we were protesting, and you can look this up, it's called, I think it's just Deborah Tavares, The Arrest. I was arrested on 1/11 of 2011. That's January 11th of 2011. And I was filmed, and you can see me being zip-tied and put into a patrol car and taken to jail. Now, this ended up getting picked up by the New York Times and the San Francisco Chronicle. And the news of the smart meter deployment went all over the world. Here I am, a rather conservative-looking grandmother, and they had painted the picture of those folks that were against the meters as hippies from the 60s. Yeah, I'll just end it at that. As hippies from the 60s. I could say more, but I won't, because I like many of the hippies from the 60s. But having said that, that went worldwide, and they immediately dropped the charges when I went to court. I had people outside protesting, don't arrest Deborah, and that was all filmed. So you can see my arrest happening. You can hear me saying that this is radiating my grandchildren, and that's exactly what these are doing. We're being assassinated. And what ended up happening was they dropped all the charges and wanted to get me out of the limelight as fast as possible because, it was a real opportunity, and it turned into a larger opportunity to get this information out. So on my website, Steve, under the source documents, I also have information in the patent on the microwave lasers, and maybe you could find that real quick and post that as well. Okay. I've been looking for it in my stack of stuff, and here it is. I got it. Okay, here it is. Okay, so it's patent number US 1033784 B as in boy 2, and it's United States, and it talks about it's a world application, 2014, and it was granted on February 7th of 2019, and the expiration date is March 13th of 2036. That's when this patent expires. March 13th of 2036. So here is what they're telling us. Directed energy weapons are devices that direct a beam of high energy towards a target for incapacitating or destroying the target. The high energy beam being a laser beam causing structural damage to the target or targets. And that's what we're seeing with the weather events all over the world. All over the world. And this is just one of, I'm certain, many, many patents. But I posted it on...
I got it.
Good. So, Steve, I could go on because I haven't done radio shows for, maybe 13 months. because there's just been so much loss in my activist community and in my research community. And I want to say this because this man, we all owe a great debt of gratitude for. He's no longer with us, but he published about 20 books. He went with us on a lot of these criminal crime fire scene events, and we interviewed with him a tow truck driver that lived down at the base of the mountain of the Paradise Fire. And this tow truck driver went up there under contract with the crews that were hauling all of the crime scene materials off the mountain. He moved off many cars that had been burned with bodies in it. Now, he saw bodies piled up on either side of the road and lots of bodies in the cars because the people could not evacuate. Just very similar to what we saw in Lahaina. And his name is James W. Lee, my friend. This is not Jim Lee of Climate Viewer. This is James W. Lee that ran the website, a different website, A Plain Truth. A Plain Truth. I'm looking at his book that he wrote on Paradise Lost. That's the Paradise Fire. Paradise Lost. The Great California Fire Chronicle. And I want to read what he has on the back of his book. And this is very important, and I hope that everyone listens closely. California Governor Jerry Brown was speaking about the most destructive wildfires in the state's history. And this is a quote. This is a new abnormal, and this new abnormal will continue, certainly, for the next 10, 15, or 20 years. And this quote was November 11th of 2018. Now, the Paradise Fires happened in 2018. Our fires here in the Santa Rosa area happened in 2017. But I'm just going to go over a number of the fires that have happened, and these are all weaponized fires. I will add this. During the rebuild of Fountain Grove, where my brother lost his home during the 2017 fire, many people prior to the fires had large boulders on their property, and they used those boulders to mix in with their landscaping, which was lovely. It was beautiful. Well, when they rebuilt, many of those boulders needed to be relocated because they had redesigned different houses, etc. And when they attempted to move these boulders to another location, they crumbled. And that's because they were hit with microwaves. There's been a massive cover-up by the fire departments, the leading heads of the fire departments, nationwide. A massive cover-up. Because we have been to countless fire meetings. We've talked to the fire chiefs and the heads that are even going down to the Pacific Palisade fires right now from Northern California because they are so experienced. They're going to help those folks down there. They're going to keep them in the lie of the illusion. That's what they're doing. And they're bleeding this and feeding this into climate change. It's not climate change. It's weather weapons.
That's right.
Weather weapons.
Very true. Deborah,
so here we
thank you so much for being on. And we'll have to pick back up again next week or so here and get you back on again, because I know that there's a lot of information that people need to know. And I know we got to get this out there to those people as quickly as possible.
Well, I thank you so much for the opportunity, Steve, more than I can tell you, because I'm just concerned for the safety of people that don't know what's happening.
Yes.
And people can make some decisions on how they'll move forward with their life. And certainly, I'm planning to go forward in right conduct, and each and every single day. And I think that's what we have to understand. We have to go forward in right conduct, because what is planned for us is so seriously evil that many people won't be living in right conduct. And we
That's
must
very
draw.
true. Very true.
Yeah, we must draw the line in the sand and determine who we are and who we will be. So again, thank you so much, Steve.
You're so very welcome, Deborah. Guys, listen, stopthecrime.com or .net is Deborah's website there, as well as primarywater.org. And of course, the website that she's not using as much anymore, toxicsky.org as well. Definitely, and of course, you can always link right back to stopthecrime.net on any of the websites that Deborah has there. And I will link in the video description for you below not only her websites, but also as many of these articles that she has talked about that I was able to find at the same time, so you could follow along or make it a little bit easier for you to find. Anyway, thank you, Deborah, so much, and give our best to Lou as well. That's Deborah's 50-plus year boyfriend. I'm just kidding, actually husband. So, but they've been, you guys, what, 52 years, Deborah, or 53 years?
Yeah, 53 years. Our anniversary was very recent.
Wow.
53 years.
So we're not going to ask Deborah her age, but she was probably 15 when she got married, right?
Well, to everybody, I know this is heavy information, but start becoming accustomed, because what's lying just around the corner, as in tomorrow, is going to continue to escalate.
Yes.
So I'll look forward to coming back on. I also want to give a shout out to Off Grid, Stacy and her husband. What is his name? Off Grid.
Doug.
With
Doug and Stacy.
Yes, with Doug and Stacy. Thank you. He recently put together an excellent video of some talks I was giving, and I thought he did an excellent job, and that is posted on my website. Maybe you would want to pull that up.
I got it up right now. I knew something was very, very wrong is the name of the video there. They've got 1.3 million subscribers there on YouTube. And he said YouTube is restricting this video, is what he says. But he's had 209,000 views. So
how many?
209,000 views.
And it's restricted. Now, one of the important aspects of that, there are many things that he showed during a talk I was giving at the Oath Keepers, but is the report from Iron Mountain. And you'll hear me talk about that.
Yes.
Briefly. And I'll talk about smart meters in depth during that as well. They do explode, and they do cause the fires. So you want to try to get these meters off of your homes, if at all possible.
Absolutely.
So again, thank you. We'll go into more detail next time. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Deborah. You have a blessed evening.